Hello and welcome to China Global Television Network. You're watching The World Today with me, Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi says China supports maintaining the momentum of a ceasefire and peace talks, which serves the interests of the Iranian people and reflects international expectations. He made the comments in a phone call with Iranian Foreign Minister Sayed Abbas Araghchi. In the call, Araghchi said Tehran is willing to continue seeking a rational and practical solution through dialogue. He said Iran appreciates China's efforts to ease regional tensions and expects Beijing to play a positive role in promoting peace and ending the war. Wang said the current situation has reached a critical stage between war and peace, with a window for peace emerging. He reaffirmed China's support for safeguarding Iran's sovereignty, security and national dignity, while also calling for the protection of international navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. Wang said China will continue to promote de-escalation, facilitate improved relations among regional countries, and play a constructive role in achieving lasting peace and stability in the Middle East. The White House has expressed optimism about a potential ceasefire with Iran as U.S. President Donald Trump claims a deal is possible by late April. It also said discussions are ongoing over a possible new round of face-to-face talks as Pakistan continues to facilitate contact. The Iranian Foreign Ministry says communication with Washington continues, but no date has been set for new negotiations. Iran's foreign ministry also stressed the country has consistently prioritized the safety of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, adding that Washington's blockade will not succeed. Meanwhile, the Washington Post reports the U.S. is sending thousands of additional troops to the Middle East in the coming days to increase pressure on Iran. Around 50,000 U.S. troops are already in the region. Nick Harper reports from Washington, D.C.
The latest noises coming out of the White House seem to be one of optimism. There is a narrative that there is momentum going on behind the scenes to try and secure a deal. The White House press secretary on Wednesday at a briefing confirmed that the US has not formally asked for an extension to the ceasefire, which is due to run out in a week's time. Earlier, Donald Trump said he didn't think it would be necessary to extend that ceasefire. Caroline Leavitt also said that the US feels good about the prospects of a deal. In terms of when the next rounds of direct talks could take place, no timeline as of yet, likely to take place in the coming days. Leavitt confirming that it's very likely that the US and Iran would sit down once again in the Pakistani capital, Islamabad.
Negotiations are underway through mediator Pakistan. The real test is how serious the other side is about its claimed diplomatic efforts. It is now up to the United States to demonstrate its sincerity.
Donald Trump has also been speaking about how quickly all of this could get wrapped up and telling Fox News that this conflict has been necessary.
I had to divert because if I didn't do that, right now you would have Iran with a nuclear weapon. And if they had a nuclear weapon, you would be calling everybody over there, sir. And you don't want to do that.
Well, you keep saying was. Is this war over?
I think it's close to over, yeah. I mean, I view it as very close to over. You know what? If I pulled up stakes right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild that country. And we're not finished. We'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal very badly.
But while the focus is on getting a deal done, the Strait of Hormuz still remains a major point of contention. The US blockade is now more than 2 days old. The US says that it has fully implemented and enforced that blockade, ensuring that no Iranian vessels are able to exit or enter any Iranian port. However, Iran says that that is illegal, that it's a violation of its sovereignty and a violation of the ceasefire agreement, and Iran is threatening to shut down shipping elsewhere, including in the Red Sea, the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman. Now, Iran doesn't have direct access to the Red Sea, and in order to create problems there, it would likely have to call on one of its proxies, the Houthis in Yemen, who have targeted shipping in that area in the past. And all of that could, of course, become a major problem for this already fragile ceasefire if that proxy were to get involved in this and more shipping get shut down. Nick Harper, CGTN, Washington.
Meanwhile, Pakistan is stepping up mediation efforts between the US and Iran. Asif Durrani is a former Pakistani ambassador to Iran. He says key issues like nuclear tensions and sanctions remain unresolved.
The question is that it has broken the ice between Iran and the United States, and hopefully they will be able to narrow down differences on difficult issues such as nuclear, such as sanctions on Iran, such as now the new issue is Strait of Hormuz. So these are and then of course there's a big objection on Iran about proxies Iran has had in the past. So overall, my impression, which I have, is that they will be discussing it further. And in return, Iran, those sanctions which were imposed on Iran under the UN were to be lifted. Incidentally, those sanctions have lapsed in 2022. It's the American-related sanctions which are still staying, and America has been pressuring other states not to do business. And the result is that Iran, which depends heavily on its oil and gas exports, was finding difficulty in selling that. When we talk about breakthrough, already cards are on the table. For instance, when you talk about lifting of sanctions against Iran, that is a key variable. So it's related to the UN, nuclear issue. So if America is satisfied with Iran's explanation on the nuclear issue, so it has to be linked to the lifting of sanctions against Iran. Similarly, I think Iran should also come up with some kind of a satisfactory explanation about its proxies in the region, say in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, and also its role with Hamas and Houthis in Yemen. This needs to be resolved. And the other issue is Hormuz, Strait of Hormuz.
2 school shootings have taken place in Turkiye's southeast in recent days. In the latest attack on Wednesday, at least 9 people, including 8 students, were killed by a teenage gunman. The attacker, who later took his own life, was a 14-year-old student. He was carrying 5 weapons in a backpack. According to the Kahramanmaraş governor, the firearms are believed to have belonged to his father, a former police officer. The incidents have raised accusations of negligence. Let's now bring in Michal Bardavid, who is joining us live from Kahramanmaraş this hour. Michal, quite a tragic incident we're hearing there. What's the latest you can bring us, and is it now clear what the motive was behind these attacks?
Yes, this is a very tragic day indeed here in Kahramanmaraş. We're right next to the mosque. Behind us, the funerals of some of the victims are still taking place. That's why we're seeing a big crowd behind me. Still, this is an active investigation, but authorities are focusing on potentially that the attack may have been pre-planned. Now, prosecutors say that they found a document on the suspect's computer dated just days before the attack took place, suggesting that he was planning a major attack. And this was dated just a few days before it happened. Police have also pointed out to his online activity, including a WhatsApp image that referenced a previous attacker in the United States. Now, despite these findings, officials are being very cautious at this moment. They say the motive is still not clear, but it's not terrorism. They've ruled out terrorism, and they're saying that this is an individual attack. The investigation has been widened. This morning, the parents of the suspect, of the attacker, were detained. The father was arrested and the mother was released. The father was arrested over the weapons because they belonged to him. But there is now focus on the fact that it may be premeditated attack. Mahia?
Right, and this, of course, marks the second school shooting in the country in just 2 days. Michal, how have the authorities in Turkey responded to ensure the safety of other schools, or are there plans to review or even strengthen school security policies there?
Yes, surely, because this is the second attack in just 2 days, as you mentioned, this has triggered a nationwide response. Authorities have already stepped up security across the country. Here in Kahramanmaraş, we're seeing police forces, police presence everywhere, and we're seeing increased police presence around schools across the country. Basically, right now, we're seeing ID checks randomly taking place, as well as some drone surveillance in some areas as well. And at the policy level, the Interior Minister as well as the Education Minister held a meeting with the governors of 81 provinces. So it was a nationwide online meeting. There, they've outlined a broader plan that includes strengthening school security, increasing inspections, restricting access to weapons, which of course was very critical here, as according to Turkish law, license for firearms can only begin after 21 years of age. And they're also aiming to improving crisis response systems, as well as a focus on prevention. So this is not just going to be an immediate response right now, but they're trying to put in a plan so that they can focus on preventing other attacks from taking place in the future.
All right, Michal, thank you very much for those updates. Michal Bardavid speaking to us live there from Kahramanmaraş in Turkiye's southeast. Moving on, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea has criticized Japan's latest diplomatic blue book, calling it a document that masks Japan's growing militarist ambitions. Pyongyang has accused Tokyo of using regional security rhetoric to justify expanding its military role and legal framework for offensive capabilities. The DPRK has also condemned Japan's remarks on Pyongyang's defense measures as a grave provocation, warning they infringe on the country's sovereignty and security interests. And that's where we leave it on this edition of The World Today. Do stay tuned. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live.
Were you worried about your life at that particular time?
Not at all.
Excellency, thank you very much for your time. What is your assessment of the state of the continent today?
Africa has the potential to power itself.
Excuse me.
South African politician Julius Malema sentenced to 5 years in prison. In Nigeria, authorities on high alert over the threat of terrorist attacks in Abuja and Niger states. And we see how drones are boosting pig breeding in Rwanda. Hello and welcome to Africa Live right here on CGTN. I'm Mahia Mutua in Nairobi. Here's what else is coming up on the program. In business, Nigeria's inflation spikes for first time in a year. And in sports, FIFA Women's Series Kenya ends with Australia beating the hosts 2-0 in Nairobi. Welcome to the program. We begin in South Africa, where opposition leader Julius Malema has been sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was convicted of 5 offences last October, including the unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition, discharging it in a public space, and reckless endangerment. The charges were related to a 2018 rally for his Economic Freedom Fighters Party 5th anniversary, where he fired an assault rifle into the air. Malema's lawyer said he would be appealing the decision, which prevents the leader from being imprisoned. On to the ongoing conflict in Sudan, which entered its 4th year on Wednesday. Donors have pledged nearly $1.8 billion in humanitarian aid to ease a hunger crisis in the war-torn nation. That's according to Germany's foreign minister. The pledge came at an international conference hosted by Berlin, along with the European Union, the African Union, France, the United States and the UK. The event aimed to mobilize aid for what it describes as one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Speaking on the sidelines of the conference, delegations have been calling for more attention to the conflict, an immediate end to hostilities and a return to the negotiating table.
I would like to express my deepest gratitude to all donors. They are helping to alleviate the suffering of the people in Sudan, even if only a little. They are helping to save lives, and they are showing that this conflict has not been forgotten.
To the Sudanese Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Forces, I say this once again. There is an alternative to war. You must publicly commit to the path of negotiation and peace, starting by agreeing to the ceasefire proposed by the Quad. Together with its partners, France stands ready to contribute to a monitoring and verification mechanism to ensure its implementation.
Under the leadership of President Trump, the United States remains steadfast in its commitment to ending this war. We are working closely with partners in this room and beyond to press for an immediate shift from battlefield to the negotiating table, from violence to dialogue, and for ending this world's biggest humanitarian crisis.
The lack of media coverage of what's going on in Sudan is something which is unfortunate. And the most disastrous humanitarian catastrophe is right now unfolding in the Sudan. People are suffering, people are dying of starvation almost every day in the camps.
And despite efforts to revive peace efforts at the Berlin conference, the warring sides, the Sudanese army and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, were excluded from the meeting. The Sudanese government has criticized the event, accusing it of interfering in the country's internal affairs. Khartoum says it was not consulted ahead of the meeting in Berlin and warned that any engagement with paramilitary groups risks undermining state sovereignty. Now, the RSF has also rejected the conference, claiming political elements close to the army were included among the participants. The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies has warned that shifting patterns of displacement in Sudan are creating rapidly evolving humanitarian needs. The organization says as people continue fleeing violence and others return to devastated communities simultaneously, it makes the tracking and delivery of aid increasingly difficult. It is also calling for urgent financial support to scale up operations and meet the needs of millions of people.
It is estimated that 33 million people will need humanitarian assistance in 2026, which is an increase from 2025, which means that the needs are growing, but the funds are not. So it's moving in the wrong direction in that sense. And it's a very complex crisis. We have, as you know, the conflict started in Khartoum 3 years ago today, and it's been moving from Khartoum, Darfur, Kordofans, and we have a very complex pattern of displacement, which also means that the aid organizations have to be very agile. And we have now a situation of people having been displaced for 3 years already. At the same time, we have newly displaced people, and we also have returnees, people returning to Khartoum. Well, we definitely welcome any effort to talk to raise funds and raise the attention. There is a connection between the lack of attention and the lack of funding. So we need to talk more about Sudan and learn more about what's going on.
Over in Nigeria, security forces are on high alert to avert a possible terrorist attack on public infrastructure in the capital Abuja and Niger State. That is according to an internal service by the association. The targets reportedly include the international airport and a prison facility in Abuja, as well as a military detention center in Niger. According to the memo, the attack aims to release detained terrorists and damage critical aviation infrastructure. The plan mirrors a similar attack in neighboring Niger Republic, and in 2022, almost 900 inmates escaped from Kuje prison near Abuja following an attack on that facility. Meanwhile, authorities have ordered an independent investigation into a military strike that killed at least 200 civilians in the country's northeast on Saturday. The information minister expressed regret for civilian casualties after the strike in the market. While defending the operation, he said the strike targeted insurgents in Jili village. That's a high-risk zone that in the region. He said the investigation strikes on contested spaces carry a high risk of killing bystanders. In Abuja, with the latest this hour, incredible are these threats.
To take precautionary measures to keep safe. Well, that being said, there are reports to counter possible attacks in Abuja. It raised alerts at we should be all other entry points. Well, President Tinubu held an emergency security meeting due to U.S. authorized staff and families. Now, for now, the U.S. placed to forestall any security breach or attack.
Right, and have authorities in Nigeria
or being the brain behind any of these attacks that usually it's not these kind of things are not mentioned here. Information has been put together, that information will be revealed, but no group has yet been named as responsible or claimed responsibility. Well, we see people with a little bit more caution.
All right, Kelechi, thank you very much for those updates. Kelechi Emekalam. And military escalations with active or simmering wars in Libya and Sudan. Now, the fallout has been felt in neighboring countries like Egypt and Tunisia. CGTN's Yasser Hakim brings us more.
Aziza Ahmed fled to Egypt, leaving behind conflict in Sudan that has led to the deaths of...
So we fled. I came with my mother, son and brother and his wife, children and grandchildren.
Meanwhile, neighboring Libya is trying to overcome civil strife that has divided the country between two governments and armed forces in the east and west since the NATO military intervention that led to the killing of President Muammar Gaddafi in 2011.
The Libyans are still not confident that the UN and US envoys can bring peace to Libya. We are still in the deadlock that started 15 years ago.
The security vacuum to Europe.
Unofficially, there are about 3 million
The major crisis in Egypt and North Africa. We have millions of Syrians and Sudanese.
Geopolitical instabilities have led to trade slowdown, job losses, and economic pressures in the region.
President Denis Sassou Nguesso of the Republic of Congo is set to be sworn in for a new 5-year term today. The inauguration ceremony is being held at Kintele Stadium in the nation's capital, Brazzaville. Sassou Nguesso was re-elected president in mid-March after garnering 94.82% of the vote. Rwandan President Paul Kagame is among the foreign dignitaries attending the ceremony. A Chinese delegation led by President Xi Jinping's special envoy Xiao Hong will also be in attendance. President Xi's special envoy led a delegation to the Senate of the Republic of Congo in Brazzaville on Wednesday. The two sides held in-depth and friendly discussions on bilateral cooperation and other exchanges. During the talks, the Chinese side said it support in agriculture, healthcare, education, and other sectors, while also expressing willingness to deepen that cooperation.
I just had a very good meeting with Ngolo Pierre, President of the Senate, during which we had an in-depth exchange on developing bilateral relations and issues of common concern. we all agree that the relationship between China and the Republic of the Congo is extremely important and particularly friendly, with broad prospects and great potential for the future. The Chinese people's political cherish this friendship, do our utmost to jointly advance the China
by the China Civil Engineering Construction Corporation. The project aims to bolster the modernization of Nigeria's fiscal and tax governance system. Standing 16 stories high, the building can accommodate over 3,000 employees. It serves as a modern, integrated office platform combining administrative management, data processing, and public services. Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, alongside other senior government officials, joined representatives from the Chinese enterprise to witness the building's inauguration.
The building is more than concrete and steel. It is a symbol of a new standard of professionalism, transparency, efficiency, and service. It reflects our resolve that institutions must rise to meet the demand of reforms and the expectation of the Nigerian people.
Now, while some international narratives paint a bleak picture of life in South Africa, a quieter trend is emerging. More South Africans living abroad are choosing to return home. CGTN's Julie Shire tells us more.
From above, Cape Town looks like it has it all, but the story hasn't always been that simple. For years, South Africans left in search of better opportunities abroad. But government figures suggest that's changing. Nearly 15,000 returned home in 2022. I decided to find out what is driving this shift and why so many South Africans are returning home after years abroad. I met up with Kimberly Richmond, who after years of living abroad decided to return home.
I always wanted to come home. I really, unfortunately, media always focuses on the bad, like on a continual basis. So you think you're going to walk down the streets and get hijacked all the time, which is not the case. I think the opportunities for people that are professionals to come back is opening up.
But Kimberly's story is not unique. Recruitment firms working with South Africans abroad say interest in returning home has been rising, driven by a mix of global uncertainty and shifting priorities. Angel, you've been doing this for years. What, in your opinion, is making so many South Africans want to return home?
Trends, though, recently showcase that in the past year and a half, we've seen about a 25 to 27% increase in inquiries of people wanting to return. The reasons people return has always been friends and family, and that has remained steady throughout. I think obviously the global uncertainty is without a doubt a massive cause. So more and more we're seeing people return home and continue working for their company abroad, but virtually.
For many, leaving South Africa was once about opportunity, but returning is often about something else entirely. The Peters family moved to the UK in search of career growth, but after 7 years, they chose to come back.
We decided that at some point we were going to go and live in the UK to explore better opportunities. The opportunities were fantastic. But then we started feeling a little bit homesick. At the end of 2020, we did come back. The first and probably the most important is the blue sky.
For me, it was family, and my children were very close to my parents. And we know, crime is a massive issue. But again, you learn to live with things. You learn to live within those parameters. So don't only listen to one group of people. Do your homework. And if your heart is really in it, you will find a way to make it work.
For those who have come back, it's not that the challenges have disappeared, but in an increasingly uncertain world, for some South Africans, the pull of home is proving stronger than the push to leave. Julie Shire, CGTN, Cape Town.
Now, drones are transforming agriculture in Rwanda, this time in an unexpected sector, pig farming. By being able to deliver swine semen to farmers much more efficiently, the technology is reported to be boosting breeding by nearly 30%. And as CGTN's Ethan Tashobia reports, that's increasing incomes and reshaping livestock farming across the country.
Cutting across Rwanda's hills, from south headed to the north, these drones are on a different mission, not medicine this time, but something just as vital for farmers: swine semen. A small delivery, yet a big transformation for pig farming across the country. In Gicumbi district, northern Rwanda, Jean-Claude is among the early adopters. He has spent 17 years in pig farming and is now one of just 7 certified breeders in the country. Before drones, accessing quality breeding services was slow, costly, and often unreliable.
Before Zipline came in to support in semen delivery, it was difficult for farmers to get semen in real time. But now my pigs conceive more easily. I get more piglets and better income. It has really changed how we farm.
Today, once a pig is ready, farmers can receive high-quality semen within minutes, allowing for timely artificial insemination. The results: healthier pigs, improved genetics, and higher productivity. Officials at Rwanda Agriculture and Animal Resources Development Board say that drone delivery of swine semen has transformed pig farming across the country. They report that success rate of insemination has risen by nearly 30%, boosting pork production and improving veterinary services across the country, especially for farmers in remote areas. Hirwa Claire, animal breeding senior researcher at RAB, says the impact of drones is significant.
Before using the drones, the success rate was around like 55%, but for now it's around 75%, between 75 and 8%. It means the drone helps us to just to send the semen as fast as possible. Then the farmers they will be able to get the semen on time. Then they will be able to inseminate their pigs.
The system, introduced at scale in 2021, has rapidly expanded. From just 500 doses delivered in early stages, Rwanda now distributes around 20,000 doses every month. The technology is powered by Zipline, originally known for delivering blood and medical supplies. Today, it is also supporting agriculture.
So today, 27% of deliveries in a day are mainly directed to redistribution of pig semen across the country. It started by resolving an actual challenge in pig insemination. So you had to find, as a farmer, you had to find through your vets a bow nearby in real time when your pigs are in heat period, which is unlikely.
For farmers like Jean-Claude, the benefits go beyond numbers. With faster delivery, lower costs, and better outcomes, pig farming is becoming more predictable and more profitable. With drones delivering critical inputs like swine semen, Rwanda is not only improving productivity, but redefining the future of farming. Ethan Tashobia for CGTN, Kigali, Rwanda.
Right, and it's just about time to check in on the business news here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up. Nigeria's inflation spikes for the first time in a year. And China's GDP beats expectations amid intensifying global headwinds. Time for the business, and we begin in Nigeria, where the country's consumer inflation rate rose for the first time in a year in March. The country had started to get price pressures under control as inflation fell for 11 straight months. However, the war on Iran has triggered a surge in domestic fuel prices, which has filtered through into food inflation. Food inflation accelerated to 14.31% year-on-year. That's up from 12.12%. Headline consumer inflation rose to 15.38% year-on-year in March, up from 15.06% in February.
Transport before was between 3,500 naira and 4,500 to deliver a basket of tomatoes. But now, because of fuel, it's between 8,000 to 10,000 for transport from Kano to Lagos, one basket.
Nowadays, life is difficult and our leaders should look into it. The roads are bad and now we have expensive fuel to contend with.
Once we bring our produce and drop it here, it is now compulsory to sell it off at any cost because it is a perishable good and will spoil. We can't even hold it for 3 days. We just sell it at any cost.
Now, the DRC has raised more than $1.25 billion in its first ever global bond sale, exceeding the government's expectations. The bond was issued in 2 tranches with 5- and 10-year maturities. The country's finance minister says the money will be used to fund infrastructure, energy and social projects. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more from Kinshasa.
Foreign investors have shown strong demand for Eurobonds issued by the DRC government earlier this year. The country's first ever issuance of a debt instrument has raised $1.25 billion. The Eurobond, issued under the supervision of the International Monetary Fund, is meant to strengthen the country's capacity to fund energy and infrastructure projects.
Gaining access to the international market is a very important stage for our country. That's why we're celebrating this historic achievement. First of all, it highlights our country's solid macroeconomic perspective. That's why I keep telling investors not to listen to what the media says, judge us by our macroeconomic performance. We are the DRC, the world's largest cobalt exporter. In 2024, we exported 220,000 tons of cobalt, and today cobalt sells for more than $56,000 per ton.
The sale of the bonds comes at a time when the DRC's economy has been battered by more than 4 years of conflict in the east of the country. The government has spent millions of dollars meant for development projects on the war effort. Finance experts have applauded the government for issuing the bond, but called for strict financial discipline.
I think international borrowing for us should not be a problem. The main thing, as I said, is efficiency at use. How do we allocate this money and how do we use it and how does it give a return on investment to the next generations?
The DRC relies heavily on revenue from its mining sector, but the country has grappled with corruption for decades. The implementation of economic reforms called for by the World Bank and the IMF has improved transparency. The country recently benefited from a positive credit rating by global agency S&P, which said the DRC's gross domestic product was set to average 5% until 2028. Experts say bond sales across developing countries soared at the beginning of this year, but later ground to a halt after the US-Israeli war against Iran began. Fears of rising energy prices and inflation led to higher borrowing costs.
The Democratic Republic of Congo's entry into the Eurobond market has included it among a growing list of African countries that borrow directly from institutional investors. Authorities here say the move illustrates the renewed confidence that investors have placed in the country's economy despite years of conflict in the East. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
In other news, Ethiopia is stepping up efforts to expand its electric vehicle charging infrastructure to keep pace with the rapidly growing number of EVs on its roads. With a national target of building more than 2,300 charging stations in 10 years, authorities are now introducing new policy measures, opening the sector to private investors and requiring EV charging facilities in hotels and real estates. Becca Atoma has more now from the capital, Addis Ababa.
Ethiopia's transition to electric vehicles is accelerating, yet electric mobility has widely been confined to Addis Ababa. The recent launch of the country's first fast-charging station outside the capital in Adama by the state-owned Ethio Telecom marks a significant step forward in expanding EV infrastructure nationwide.
When you just move away or have a trip outside of Addis, we have a great problems with the charging stations. It's a big challenge for us because we are exposed to individuals. They charge us a lot amount of money, at least 2,000 for a single charge margin. Even we are at risk sometimes because the system of the installation might not be by professionals. The experience that Ethio Telecom did in Adama has to be expanded to other parts of Ethiopia. It is very urgent these days.
Here in Addis Ababa, there are just about 200 electric vehicle charging stations like this one. The infrastructure is still catching up with the country's fast-growing EV fleet, which according to the Ministry of Transport and Logistics has now surpassed 140,000.
We have a plan to build around 2,300 electric charging stations with high capacity. That is the 10 years plan. Now we have in Addis around 200 fast charging stations, but we need to have 1,176 fast charging stations in Addis Ababa only in 10 years. To achieve that plan, we are working aggressively with different stakeholders. We have a directive for private sector to join and invest on electric charging points investment or construction. And also we have a state-owned enterprise or institutions like Ethio Telecom. Currently, Ethiopian Electric Power has joined this effort.
The introduction of additional policy measures such as mandatory EV charging facilities in hotels, real estates, gas stations, as well as EV assembly and sales points are helping the country's EV infrastructure to gradually improve. While pushing forward with the expansion of EV charging infrastructure, authorities are also enforcing strict quality standards to help maximize battery life.
These machines first analyze and learn the characteristics of the cars and their batteries before charging. For example, it analyzes the battery's chemical and electrical characteristics, including its state of health, state of charge, and depth of discharge. If the battery has issues such as unbalanced cells, it balances them using its built-in balancers before charging. In other places, all of these are paid functions that are not available for free.
Bold policies, including the January 2024 ban on fuel-powered car imports, have put Ethiopia on the global EV map. Sustaining that momentum will depend on how quickly charging infrastructure can keep up. Beka Atoma, CGTN, Addis Ababa.
China's economy started the year on good footing despite a complex and challenging external environment. This is according to the deputy head of the country's Statistics Bureau, who termed the achievement as rare and commendable. He adds that the impact from volatile global oil prices has been relatively small on the world's second largest economy. Notably, China's economy accelerated early in 2026 on strong exports and policy support. However, cooling retail sales add urgency to Beijing's efforts to revive sluggish domestic consumption as the Iran war raises fresh risks to global demand and growth.
Looking at the three sectors from the supply side, as well as the three key areas of demand, performance has been relatively strong across the board. In particular, the first quarter of last year represented the highest base for China's economic performance. So achieving a solid start this year against such a high base, and against the backdrop of a high base and a more complex and challenging external environment, we have had a good start to the year, which is truly rare and commendable. This fully reflects the resilience of the Chinese economy. Value-added industrial output at above-scale firms rose 5.7% year-on-year in March and increased 0.28% from February. The Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index stood at 50.4 in March, up 1.4 points from the previous month, while the Index of Expectations for Business Operations reached 53.4. In January and February, industrial firms above a designated size posted total profits of 1.02 trillion yuan, up 15.2% year-on-year.
Meanwhile, China's equity markets advanced on Thursday as upbeat GDP figures cheered investors in both the Chinese mainland and Hong Kong. On the Chinese mainland, the benchmark Shanghai Composite Index gained 0.7%, while the Shenzhen Component Index closed up 2%. The blue chip CSI 100 rose a modest 1.1%. In Hong Kong, the benchmark Hang Seng Index also rose on the news. The Federal Reserve's Beige Book released Wednesday paints a weakening picture of the U.S. economy as businesses pull back on hiring and investment due to Middle East uncertainty. Economic activity has been downgraded to modest from moderate. The Middle East conflict has triggered sharp energy price hikes for businesses and homeowners, along with moderate rises in industrial metals. The Fed also noted growing financial strain on consumers, including heightened price sensitivity and increased demand at food banks. Economists say the report has a stagflation-like tone, pointing to slowing growth alongside persistent price pressures. It's just about time for the sport here on Africa Live. Here's what's coming up in the program. The FIFA Women's Series Kenya ends with Australia beating hosts Kenya 2-0 right here in Nairobi.